So it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Mel, and welcome to W&A.
Thanks so much, Cheryl and Beck, for having me today. And thank you for those of you who are here live, and welcome to those of you who are watching the recording. I like to make these sessions as interactive as possible, so I will be doing everything within my capabilities to have a conversation with you. So I like to run masterclasses where we can learn from each other as much as you learn from me. So let's go. I will just share my screen.
Just while Mel's doing that, I'll just mention that she's coming to us from the Sunshine Coast. Mel has achieved the dream many of us have, which is to be able to mix living in a beautiful part of the world with working. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that, Mel.
Yeah, thanks. We moved here. Sorry, I'm just still organising a few things here. I don't know why I can't see what I'm not seeing. There we go. Um, There we go. We moved here. We decided to move here about 2 years ago. We were on holidays in Bagara, which is just near Bundaberg. And first day we were there walking on the beach, said to my husband, okay, it's time to move. I need to walk on the beach every day. And about 6 weeks later, we bought a house in Caloundra. It was the first house we looked at, and it was just perfect for us. So we looked at a couple of others, and they just weren't even remotely near what we were looking for. So we took the plunge and have never looked back. So it's just been such a huge change for us to move up here from Brisbane. And yeah, so if any of you are thinking about making a big change in your life and moving from a city to a non-city area, I'm really happy to have a conversation about the pros and the cons. There's been a few cons, but for us, not very many. But yeah, we just love it. Go to the beach nearly every day. Not today. It was 4 degrees when I got up this morning, so that was a bit too chilly, and the water's freezing. So today we're talking about self-leadership. It's time to stop surviving and start thriving. And as I mentioned, I really like this to be a conversation because I really believe that we learn as much from each other, and we actually can learn more from each other. Peer-to-peer learning is such an important part of education and learning in the world today, and there should be more of it as far as I'm concerned. So if you've got questions at any time, you're welcome to pop your hand up, um, and either use the putting your hand up symbol, or coming off, or turning on your camera and putting a physical hand up. I can see you all. Or you're welcome to type a question in the chat, whichever is more comfortable for you. I'm watching the chat box as well. So why am I talking about this? Well, my background is quite varied. I started my professional world, my professional life, running events in Sydney for a small event management company. We ran conferences primarily for associations and member-based organisations, and I did a bit of travel with that. But it was long hours. We did a lot of events. We were a small team. All of our clients had volunteer organising committees and volunteer boards, and so we did a lot of, committee meetings after hours. Not so much on weekends, but most conferences were held on weekends. So while I learned a lot and I absolutely loved my job and I loved the people I worked with, and we were a really solid team of four, and we're all still in touch with each other 25 years later. So I think that says a lot about the organisation that my boss Gail created. I stayed there for 3 years, and I was a bit, on the cusp of exhaustion, and had planned to do a year traveling around Mexico, learning Spanish, which I started learning at uni and realized that learning a language in the classroom is just not fun. Decided to move to Mexico, and just as I was about to buy my plane ticket, I was offered a job for a global marketing agency running all the events for Microsoft in Australia. And the money was great compared to the money that I'd been on, and my ego went, "Pow." So I said yes to the job, and within about a week of starting the job, thought, what the hell did I do that for? I think I've made a big mistake. But didn't realize that I could say no. I didn't realize that I could quit this job after a week and go to Mexico, because my ego was still on cloud nine because I'd been headhunted for this job, and I knew a few of the people who I won this job over, and they were luminaries in the industry. And so, in hindsight, I suspect they just laughed at the terms and conditions and the pay. But I was 28 and didn't really know any better. So, unsurprisingly, we ran 300 events in a year with a team of 6. And by the end of that year, actually, not even by the end of the year, by about October of that year, I was a quivering wreck in the corner. Most nights when I got home from work, I was exhausted. I was not sleeping. I was working an average of probably 75 hours a week. I traveled a lot and didn't get a lot of sleep in hotels. Had a really demanding client. Microsoft are a great organization, but the expectations that they placed on everybody who was involved with them were enormous. And because we were understaffed, that really didn't help. So, unsurprisingly, I got to the end of the year and just collapsed in a screaming heap. Had a really great holiday at Christmas. First day back in the office, my boss said to me, "How was your break?" And my first words were, "I quit." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, didn't actually know I was going to say that, but I did. So, okay, I quit." So I gave 8 weeks notice because I had a few things. I was living in Sydney, had a few things in Sydney that I wanted to do. Within about the first week or two after resigning, I decided that I'd leave Sydney and move to Queensland. And that was such a good decision for me. It completely changed my life on many, many levels. So that was one reason why I'm so passionate about self-leadership. The other reason is because when I was in my early 40s, my parents both died really unexpectedly. And I'd lost a few other people I'd loved had died, in the couple of years before, really young and unexpectedly. And it just made me realize that life is really short. And if you don't do things you love, then what's the point? And so I made a few decisions that really helped me understand, get a better sense of who I was, what was important to me, what I valued, and what my priorities in life were. And since then, I've just tried really hard to live a life that I love and that I choose as much as possible. And that's, one reason why I started my own business in 2006 was so I could have some more flexibility around how I spent my time and who I worked with. I'm rambling a bit now, sorry about that. And then again, a few years ago, I had a melanoma, and that was it was very confronting when my plastic surgeon said to me 6 weeks after surgery, "If I hadn't taken it out when I did, you'd be dead in a year." So, those 3 things just really made me realize that so often we don't put ourselves first, and so often we don't prioritize what's important to us. And so I'm really passionate about helping people understand how they can put themselves first, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. Professionally, I did a lot of work in corporate communication, in working with organizations to help them communicate with more impact. And a lot of the people I was working with, particularly people in small business, in communications teams, in corporates, were just on the cusp of, they were really struggling with everyday life because of the expectations that were being placed upon them in the workplace. And so that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, because I was just seeing so much how people were really, struggling to get through the day and not sure how to get out of this situation that they found themselves in. So I started writing this book in 2019. Then COVID hit, and I just couldn't think or really do because of the uncertainty of everything. And so the book got pushed aside a little bit, and then I finished it last year. So you'll get a copy, and I hope you love it. I really hope it resonates with you. You'll see in the book that there's a lot of practical activities and tools and tactics that you can do, and there's also a workbook that you can download when you get that, which will take you through a few other exercises. But some of the things that we're going to talk about today are what's stopping you from putting yourself first. So I would love to know. You're welcome to type in the chat or put your hand up or come off mute. But I would love to know, why are you not putting yourself first? Or maybe you are putting yourself first. What does that look like?
Mel, I'll encourage others to come in, but I'll be brave, and because I'm really terrible at putting myself first. In fact, I think I have the DNA to do the opposite, and I think it does come a lot from your upbringing. In my case, as a young girl, I needed to kind of step up. And when my parents divorced when I was very young, so it was all about caring for the family unit, or what was left of the family unit. So I think in my case, a lot of it came from the circumstances that you find yourself as a young person, and it was always about making sure that those around you were looked after and supported, and therefore there's no time left. No time left is probably an excuse. The reality is, it just has never really been a priority for me.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And some of the comments, Nadia has said the good old excuse of busy. Yeah, busy is the enemy of self care. And it's so easy to get trapped in that hamster wheel of busy. And then, Demi has said, if I mispronounced your name, sorry, Demi, as a healthcare professional looking after others, keep postponing looking after myself. And Sandra has said, mum duties. Yeah. But, if we don't look after ourselves, then how do we look after others in the way that we would like to? And particularly, how do we look after our children? And how do we set the example for our children if we are constantly forgetting to look after ourselves? One of the things that I think is really important to think about is what happens when your cup runs dry. How are you capable then of looking after others and the people who you love when you don't have any energy or time or energy for yourself? There's so many things that we have challenges with today, and I've got a few up on the screen here. We've got increased pressures with work and life, and for those of you who are also Gen X, so many Gen X, which I am, have responsibilities for young children. Like I'm 52, and I've got a ridiculous number of friends who have children under the age of 10. And so not only are they juggling these young children, a lot of them are at the peak of their career, and a lot of them are looking after aging parents as well. And so you've got these three things that you're trying to juggle, and it's no surprise that the easiest thing to drop off is yourself. But, hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a few ideas about what you can be doing to put yourself first. The other thing that I think we need to think about today is increasing loneliness. There's this fantastic book that I read last year called Together, and it was written by Dr. Vivek Murthy. And Dr. Murthy was what was his title? He was the Surgeon General of the United States when Barack Obama was president. And so he's quite young. He's only probably about 50 now. He was very young to do this job. But one of the things that he did was he went around the country and he listened to people talking about what was impacting their lives from a health perspective. And he asked a lot of questions, met a lot of people, went to almost all corners and the middle of the US. And he said in his book, what surprised him wasn't that people were telling him about the big issues, so their concerns about dementia and Alzheimer's and drug use and abuse and heart disease and the growing challenges faced by a growing obesity across the population. But he said running through all of that was this thread of loneliness and how so many people were lonely. And this was long before COVID made us all isolate at home alone. This was, 8-10 years ago. And so what I find really interesting is that loneliness has been pervasive in our society for a long time, but nobody talks about it. And so one of the things that we need to remember when it comes to loneliness is that it's not just older people who live alone who struggle with this, it's younger people as well. I was in running a masterclass for a client yesterday, and one of the things that the manager of the team, who's a senior exec in the organization, said is, I'm just really lonely. I'm really lonely at work. And I was talking to her after about it, and she said, as soon as I said it, I thought, God, I shouldn't have said that in front of my team. But I said, no, you absolutely should have said it in front of your team because they need to know. And, I hear this so often from my clients, particularly those in senior leadership roles and business owners, that they are lonely because, the higher you get, the fewer people you have that you feel that you can trust to talk to. And when we have loneliness at work and loneliness at home and loneliness in society, we have increased social isolation. And one of the side effects of social isolation is increased anxiety leading to depression. And when we feel lonely, that impacts our ability to think, our ability to take action, our ability to make decisions, our ability to sleep, and our ability to properly look after ourselves. And so I don't think there's enough being said in most communities about the impact that loneliness has, or even an acknowledgement that there are people who are lonely. And so the fact that, you've got this amazing network, Cheryl, is hopefully providing an opportunity for people to have conversations about things that challenge them, that ease that loneliness. Because, I'm sure you've all heard the expression, a problem shared is a problem halved. I believe that so firmly. And, the more we talk to people about what's on our minds, the more we can brainstorm solutions or just relieve ourselves of the burden of the worry.
It's
One
true,
of the
Mel. I just wanted to comment that it's really interesting that you say that, because I know I had conversations with a number of our, really senior leaders, sort of CEOs of ASX listed companies and the like. And I was always curious, why did you join Women's Network Australia? I mean, you're at the top of your career. You've done such amazing things. You know so much. Like, why are you part of this network? And a number of them cited the fact that they spend all of their time either talking with work colleagues or family, and they've lost contact with a social network. So for them, WNA plays an opportunity to give back to others,
Yep.
but also an opportunity to connect and deal with those feelings of loneliness and isolation.
Absolutely. And I think as well, so often in society today, it's normal to leave where you grew up. So, I grew up in Gosford, left there when I was 17, never ever moving back. But I, you lose those, you lose touch and you lose connection with people who knew you when you were a child. And there's nothing quite like having a friendship with someone or having a conversation with someone who has known you since you were a child, because they know the real you. And, adult friendships are amazing, but there's nothing that compares to having those deep bonds of friendship with people that have known you for most of your life. And so, one of the things, that I've noticed over the years is so many of my friends and family have moved away from where they grew up. And, because time, other things take priority, and with social media being so easy to keep in touch with people, you don't have real conversations anymore with so many people who, even 10 years ago, you might have picked up the phone and had a call with. Now you just think, oh, yeah, they're okay. I see what they're doing on Facebook, or their Instagram looks like they're having a great life. So why would I have a conversation about the things that are troubling me? And that is what is leading to this sense of disconnection and isolation and anxiety and depression. It's just, well, it's one of the many things. The other reason I think so many of us, particularly women, don't prioritize ourselves is we don't think we're worthy. We struggle with imposter syndrome, and we look at, particularly, with things on Instagram. Man, some days I think Instagram should just shut down for a week. And how much better would our lives be on so many levels? But we just don't feel worthy, and we have comparisonitis to people who we believe are living far better lives than we are, when at the end of the day, everybody, or most of them, probably have the same issues and worries and concerns that you have. The other thing that we are so often afraid of or worried about when it comes to putting ourselves first is we're often afraid of the reaction to our vulnerability. And we worry about what people will think if we admit that we aren't the be all and end all that we often show ourselves to be. And this can be true in the workplace or with your friends. And, you know, I certainly remember many times when I had that hideous job with the global marketing agency, my mother would say to me, just come for lunch tomorrow. And I'm like, no, I can't. I need to stay home. I'm exhausted. I can't. It's just, it's, I need a day of rest. And she said, you can just rest tomorrow. But, you know, they lived a 3 hour drive away, or 3 hour round trip drive away. So not only was it lunch, it was 3 hours in the car to get there. And that was if the traffic was good. So I just think there's this lack of understanding of what we're going through. And when you get told so many times, just suck it up or you'll be fine, or, you know, as one of my bosses once said to me, when I said, you're giving me too much work, I can't get through it all, he said, don't be so lazy, just do it. And so when you get those reactions, is it any wonder that we just push through? And then the other thing that we think so often is that we mistake self-care for selfishness. And personally, I believe that it's really selfish not to look after yourself first, or at least prioritize yourself part of the time. Because if you don't put good self-care measures in place, then you're not going to be capable of doing very much for other people. And finally, I think one of the things that has caused a lot of anxiety over the last couple of years with COVID is that uncertainty around what's next. And there's research from, I think it's McKinsey, said that as a society, our levels of anxiety escalated significantly in 2020, the first year of COVID, but they didn't drop in 2021, which I thought was really interesting. And this is across all genders, ages, professions. People are operating at an increased level of anxiety compared to 2019 and before. And then, you know, for many of us, I don't know how old most of you are, but add menopause into the mix, and dealing with the symptoms of menopause, whether it's forgetfulness or sleeplessness or increased anxiety that comes with that, or, you know, the physical symptoms of changing periods and concern and all these delightful other things that happen to women once they reach their 40s. Is it any wonder that we're exhausted? Amen to menopause, yeah. Don't get me started. Fortunately, I'm through the worst of it. Also, I keep on thinking, and then I don't sleep for 3 nights, and it's like, God damn it, what's going on? So what do we think of these? Do these resonate? Any of these things that we've just talked about resonate with you?
Mel, I put the comment in about your second last point about mistaking self-care for selfishness, and you know, that sort of treatment that we give ourselves, or the guilt that goes with, okay, I'm going to do something for myself, you know, I'm going to treat myself to some self-care, and then feeling bad about it afterwards because I should have been doing this, or I should have been doing something else. So in other words, the benefit of the self-care is almost undone by the guilt that comes after.
Absolutely. And the expression guilty pleasure, every time someone says on social media, what's your guilty pleasure? I just have this haze of red that flashes across my eyes, because why should pleasure be guilty? Why should you feel guilty for doing something that gives you pleasure? Yeah. Seriously. Whether it's eating the third Tim Tam or watching another episode of, you know, whatever you're loving on Netflix, regardless of how trashy it might be. I'm currently rewatching Private Practice, which I missed most of the first time around, and it's great. And, you know, I love it because it completely switches my mind off whatever is on my mind at the time. And, you know, you're so right, Cheryl. We need to just be we need to be thinking about what is it that we can be doing that lights us up.
Is there a way to attach benefit to it, Mel? Is it about looking at self-care and equating a real benefit rather than sort of just doing it and go, oh, that was nice, but now I feel terrible because...
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk a bit more about that, about the benefits of looking after yourself and prioritizing yourself and leading yourself first, because there's tons of benefits. But, I think the first thing that we need to think about in terms of benefits is that we need to remember that it's okay to not be okay. And we can't be on all the time. We need those times. It's like, excuse me, I've got, oh my God, that coffee's just gone down the wrong way. Apologies if I do it. A very unladylike burp. My mother would be horrified. Um, it's like our phones can't be on all the time. We have to plug them in to charge them. And so we need to be plugging our bodies and our brains and our souls and our minds in to recharge those every day as well. And it doesn't, there's little things that we can be doing, or there's big things that we can be doing, but we need to be remembering that if we aren't feeling okay, either physically or mentally or emotionally, we need to put our hand up and we need to seek help. And whether that help is from a friend or a colleague that you can trust to listen to you, or whether it's professional help from a medical professional or something in between, we need to remember that it's okay to not be okay, and that real life is not the highlight reel of an Instagram feed. Really irritates me. Michelle Obama has said many times that we need to get better at putting ourselves higher on our own to-do list. And so I'd like you to have a think about what are all of the things that are currently on your to-do list, today, tomorrow, this week, this month, and where have you put you in that? Now, the fact that you've turned up to watch this and to be a part of this is a really great start, where you're putting you first. And so thank you for that. And, you should thank yourself for that, because there's a lot of people who won't do that. But what is it that you're doing to put yourself first on your to-do list? How do you work out what you're going to do each day, and how you're going to allocate your time, and how you're going to make sure you have enough energy? Do you have exercise on your calendar? Do you have eating lunch every day as a plan to do? Personally, can't understand people who say I forgot to have lunch, because my day revolves around what deliciousness I'm going to have for lunch. And today I actually haven't worked out what it is yet, because I've been thinking about this, but there's good leftovers in the fridge. But think about, how do you put yourself first, and what does that look like? And how do you work out do you have a good understanding of what your core priorities are? So what are the most important things in your world? Is it work? Is it kids? Is it pets? Is it something else?
Mel, I again encourage the others to please speak, but that's a really challenging question, because for me, I know that it's family, but it's very easy to. So when I do my to-do list in the morning, there's nothing in there about family or myself. It's all about work.
Yeah.
So even though, the answer to the question is, what do I value most and what are my priorities? Well, they are my family, but that almost is a different compartment in my brain that doesn't seem to have a to-do list. It's just a constant sort of hovering cloud, I suppose. So yeah, maybe it's about actually thinking about those priorities in the same way, or at least on an equivalent way, as things like work priorities. Sandra and Nadia, do you have some thoughts on that? I know Bex agreed with me, and yeah, certainly trying to prioritize really those values in the conversation.
I've got a colleague who puts everything in his diary, and he color codes it all. So he color codes, client work, deep work, family time, exercise time, personal time. And if you look at his calendar, it's got something for every minute of the day, from when he gets up until when he goes to bed. And included in that are big blocks of time for family time. And, one of his priorities, he's got 3 boys, and one of his priorities, particularly when the boys were younger, was that they had dinner as a family every night. And there were no exceptions.
Sandra, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, it is about um, I find I work better when I do plan the week, or a first thing in the morning to set yourself up. And you do need to um, take all aspects into account and um, set work boundaries.
Yeah.
If you say you're going, we're working from home half the time and other things, and just making sure you do switch off your computer and leave the home office to do those other things, or otherwise it all merges into one.
Do you have a cue for when you switch off work at the end of the day, Sandra?
No, I've heard about people having a sort of physical activity, or shut the door, or something like that, which it sends you're a signal that work is finished for the day.
Yeah. I was thinking more, when I was an employee, my cue to finish work for the day is that people would start leaving to go home. And so I'd look up and I'd think, okay, it's 4:30, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to finish the task that I'm doing and leave. And particularly once I moved to Brisbane, there was nobody in the office by 5 past 5. Unlike when I lived in Sydney, where the last person would leave at about 9 o'clock at night. But when I started working from home, I'd just so often get engrossed in things. And it was when my husband would come home from work and turn on the Channel 9 news, and I'd hear the theme music for the news. And I'd think, okay, it's 6 o'clock. How did it get to be 6 o'clock? But it's 6 o'clock and it's time to go and cook dinner and spend time with Sean and stop work. But so often, when we do work from home, we forget about, we lose that cue.
Demetra, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, just to give another perspective of the way that I have been looking at this, but maybe it's because of my profession, and I do love what I do. So my highest priority, my value it is family. But family can sometimes be, I don't have any family here in Australia, um, and I live by myself. But family for me can be like a different concept. So family is my business, is my business is my baby, and my patients are my extended family. But maybe it's because I love doing it. I love looking after them. The cue for me, I do prioritize kind of thing like my self care, which doesn't always happen, but I have put it in my to-do list. But all I wanted to say is just, with the values and family, or self-care, or me time kind of thing, can have like can be as concepts, not necessarily what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of working out what it means to you. And,
Yeah.
family can be different things, but everybody has different priorities as well. Like, I've got friends who don't have, their parents are no longer with them, they don't have children, they don't have a partner, so their friends are their family. And so their top priority is to spend time with other people, which includes people whose company they enjoy, like their friends and clients and colleagues. And yeah, it's working out what is it for you, and committing, and I'm not necessarily even committing to that, but understanding who you are and what you want. And I think as we age, our priorities change. I know that my priorities when I was in my 20s were quite different to my priorities now that I'm in my 50s. And I suspect that's true for most of us. So, Cheryl, you mentioned before there's got to be some benefits to putting ourselves first, and there are. What do we think they might be?
Well, I like all these things. I know the theory, but I'm not very good at the practice. There's obviously mental health benefits. We obviously can be happier, more relaxed, less stressed by by putting some time into ourselves. And then there's obviously physical benefits that come with that, you know, and perhaps we'll have nice nails and hair as well, because we might actually go and do something like that. So yeah, I mean, there's all of those things. I guess it's about what you value as to where those benefits lie and how important they are for you, and how potentially long lasting it can be. You know, going off and having a massage, fantastic, but half an hour later thinking, well, that was 2 hours of my life I've now lost and can't get back. Oh gee, how am I going to deal with that? So how do we what are the benefits beyond the immediate gratification?
Yeah, and I'd love to know from, you know, Sandra, Nadia, what do you think? When you put yourselves first and do things for you, how does that make you feel?
With me, it makes me feel great, and then I feel guilty. I do get the guilt, depending what it is. If it's just to go and get my nails done, no, I don't feel guilty for that. It's just.
I'm with you, Nadia. I can't quite get past it was good for a moment, and now, oh no.
Yeah.
Kind of like the equivalent of emotional buyer's remorse.
Exactly. There's one thing I noticed that one area I do feel guilty. So I've bought a Pilates pole and mat and everything to do it at home, because I feel guilty, which I didn't realize this until now that I'm thinking about it, going out. You know, it's going to take me an hour, say, for example, half an hour to get there, an hour of class, and then an hour back. Or half an hour back. So it's 2 hours of my time that will get me out. Whereas if I do it at home, you know, I don't have that travel time, and I can do it for an hour and not feel guilty. And so it's just, I don't know.
Do you do it at home?
Not every day, no.
But would you have gone to a class every day?
No, probably the classes I was looking at was probably 2-3 times a week. But the one thing that I don't feel guilty, it's really weird. My family, my boys are older and out, so they've got their own life. So it's not the family side of things. For me, it's my business. It's like, there's so much to do. I need to get on with it. Otherwise, I'm going to let my clients down. So that's where my guilt sits, not so much with the family, because I also brought our family was, everyone sits at the dinner table for dinner and they do that now too, that they're, that they're at home. They won't have dinner without their partner, even at 7, 8 o'clock at night. So that's always been, there was never a TV on. We never had a TV in the dining area. It was separate. TV was not allowed to be turned on in the morning before they went to school. TV was turned on when they got home from school until after dinner. So we had all these little things that kept the family, that I was really strict about with family. But having said that, it's not about them. It's me feeling guilty about the business, which has been taken over from the children, if that makes sense.
Can I ask, what's your business?
Okay, so I've got it's a bookkeeping, as well as I also do money coaching. So it's two separate.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this is a whole other conversation, but actually, no, we'll have it another time. One of the things I say to my clients is, if you've got too much work coming in, put your fees up. So you'll still have the same amount.
I've done that. Yeah, I've done that, and they won't go away, and they still keep coming. I've tripled my fees, but they still.
Excellent.
Yeah,
maybe quadruple them for new clients, or times them by 5 or 10.
I was talking to my coach about it, and she said, "You're just going to have to start now culling and just tell them, no longer."
Yeah, I did that a few years ago. I sacked the majority of my clients because the work I was doing for them didn't fill me with joy, or they didn't. And I just went, you know what? Life's too short. I went to business to do work that I love with people I really like, and I wasn't doing either of those things with some clients. So I just went, see ya. Which was very scary and confronting, but it opened doors for the people who I did want to work with.
It opened next space. That's right.
Yeah, it did.
That's exactly what I'm looking at doing. Yeah, that's on my to-do list for September.
Yeah, awesome.
Nadia, don't forget, reach out to the network. There's others there who can collaborate with you, and maybe there are some who are experiencing the opposite problem.
Yeah.
And you could work together with them and share that load.
And there might be other people in the network who you can refer clients to, because they might not be right for you, but they might be right for someone else.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
that's certainly what I found. I tried to refer all of my clients that I didn't want to work with onto somebody else so that I wouldn't leave them in the lurch.
And that's exactly what I want
Yeah.
to do. I don't want to just leave them in the lurch. I
Yeah.
want to find someone for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
And interestingly, all of my clients were really happy to, I just had a really open, honest conversation with them about why it was time for them to move on. And I certainly didn't say it's not me, it's you, but that's how it was. But for most of them, I just said I'm doing different work now. My focus is on different things, and this is what I'm focusing on. And if you'd like to talk about how we can work in this space, then I'd be really happy to. And for a couple of clients that didn't really like that view, I just said I'm putting my fees up a lot, and they said, "Oh, that's too much," and I went, "Great, let me refer you on."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I still talk to all those clients, so they weren't. I think people expect that you have to make the right business decision, and what's the commercially smart decision for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And burning is around the corner, so I don't want to hit that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sandra, did you have a comment there before we move on?
I've forgotten actually.
Oh, it was about what are the benefits, what are the benefits of self-care, or how do you perceive those benefits, putting yourself first?
Yeah. Well, I went through a period a while ago where, almost burnt out. But you can get away with it for a little while by not, as Mel said, filling your cup. But it will eventually catch up with you. And so I just try and, focus on, I need to be turning up for my business and my clients with the right type of energy. And to do that, I need to look after my body and, feed myself the right food by not, snacking and quick and easy takeaways and things. So I try and look at it, well, there's a payoff to my clients if I'm in the right headspace by looking after myself, but also I know that it will eventually catch up with me and, cause a problem later on.
Yeah, and your clients deserve the best of you, and you deserve the best of you, even more importantly. What's your business, Sandra?
I need to hook up with Nadia. I'm just starting out. I was a financial advisor and accountant, and I'm starting out. Just finished my money coaching certification and got an online business.
Fantastic. There's definitely a need for that, I think. A lot of people who I know
sort of basic financial information and assistance that's outside, the typical complex, expensive advice process that's out there at the moment.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who are about to be in a whole world of pain when it comes to money. Just with interest rates going up, people buying houses at inflated prices, watching the property market go down, and the price of everything except wages going up. So
and the money coaching training that I did was interesting because it also addresses some of the emotional issues we have behind money.
Yeah.
And we don't always make rational decisions because we've got some things in our background from our parents or other behaviours that we're
absolutely.
So trying to address some of that as well.
Everyone has a money story, and it really influences how you think about it. I was saying to someone the other day, I used to work for the Office of Fair Trading, and one of the things I did when I was there was write a good credit guide on how to manage credit. And the number of people who didn't recognise that a credit card was debt blew my mind. But I also didn't fully comprehend that a credit card was debt either when I was in my 20s, because it was just money that I could get, completely forgetting that I had to pay it back. And, I'm just grateful that growing up, my parents never put anything on a credit card unless they could pay it off in full at the end of each month. And so it taught me good money practices, but a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the benefits when we put ourselves first, we talked about being happier and healthier, but we're also more human. And I think what I mean by that is that when we're more human, we're more willing to be vulnerable, and we're more willing to show up with authenticity and with empathy. And because it's really hard to demonstrate empathy in particular for other people when you're exhausted, or when you're not sleeping properly, or when you're not feeling at your best. The other thing that is such a huge benefit of putting ourselves first and feeling good about ourselves, both physically and mentally, is that when we have challenges that come in our path, that we're much more prepared to deal with them. One of the things that I'll talk a little bit about in a bit is that self-care leads to resilience, because when you feel good about yourself, you're much more resilient to things that, you know, might fall outside of your preferred way of life, whatever that might be. From a work perspective, when we put ourselves first, we energize our co-workers because we bring a much more positive energy into the workplace. And whether you're working for yourself or in a team or for the clients that you have, when you feel good about yourself, you're much more positive. It's just normal. We also communicate with conviction when we have that, when we look after ourselves. And by that, I mean we communicate more with heart, and we think before we speak and act more willingly. And we do that because we're not on that hamster wheel, rushing, trying to get everything done. So we create a bit of space for thinking and for strategy and for planning. And when we communicate with conviction, we're much more likely to create change, and we're much more likely to influence people to do things for us in the way that we want them to do them. And whether that's, you know, your staff or your clients or your kids, it's far easier. Like, I remember when I was, I've got a stepson, and when he was a young child and a teenager, he would be far more likely to do everything I asked if I asked him, you know, in a firm and rational way, as opposed to shrieking or screaming at him because I was exhausted and he wasn't doing what I wanted the first time I asked. So the benefits are huge. And then, you know, the final benefit, or one of the final benefits, is that we create a culture of belonging. And for those of you who, and whether this is in our family or whether this is in our workplace, when people feel like they belong, they are less likely to feel lonely. They're less likely to feel isolated. They're more likely to be focused on their work and productive. And they're far more likely to, organizations that have cultures of belonging have greater focus and productivity. They have more profit. They have fewer accidents and injuries in the workplace. They have far less absenteeism because people aren't taking sickies because they don't like where they work. So the benefits of putting ourselves first as leaders are huge. However, before we can thrive, we do need to get out of that survival mode. And I know there's a lot of people who are feeling like they're either surviving or stuck. So, you know, just have a look at this, this diagram on the screen and have a think about where you might be right now. When you're surviving, you're just going through the motions and you're quite overwhelmed with life and you don't really know how to cope with anything that's not within your little narrow window of what you feel that you have control over, which isn't very much. When you're stuck, you're going in circles. You're unhappy, you're unsure about things, and you're unfocused. When you're achieving, you're getting noticed and you're doing things, but achieving is often code for busy. And when you're busy, you're not looking after yourself. You're just doing everything that needs to be done. And, you know, you're not quite operating on rote, but you're not focusing on your own priorities. Achieving is often doing things based on other people's timelines. So it might be saying yes to meetings that you don't really want to go to, or doing work with people who don't, you know, that you don't really want to do, or committing to, you know, family commitments that you'd rather say no to, because you have this sense of obligation to be saying yes to everything. When we are shining, we've got great energy, we're self-aware, we understand what we want, and we know how to get it, and we've got a focus for what is important to us. And then at the top, when we're thriving, we've got really clear boundaries, we're confident in who we are and what we stand for and what we want out of life. We've got peak energy and peak focus. So have a look at that and think about, where are you? Does any of that resonate with you?
Mel, it certainly resonates with me, not in a particularly good way, I'd have to say. I feel like probably I'm around about the zero and in danger of dropping under the negatives based on the focus levels, which is, it's a really great model to actually make you think about what the impact is and to reprioritize. Disturbingly, I'd like to be thinking that I'm shining and thriving, but I think the reality is that I'm sort of sitting at the lower half of the spectrum.
Yeah. I show this diagram a lot, and I did a workshop the other day for a client and in the education sector, and I reckon 80% of the people on the call said they were either surviving or stuck, and the rest said they were achieving. And I think that is just such a common response. I can count on one hand the number of people who think they're thriving at the moment, because life is hard right now for a lot of people. And so if you are stuck in stuck mode or in survival mode or on that hamster wheel of achieving, there's ways out. What about you, Sandra, Nadia, Demi, Beck? Any thoughts?
I agree with Cheryl, Mel. I think I probably, based on your description, would sit in that achieving section. And I think that's a lot of, well, I'm glad to hear there's a way out to start with, because it does sort of, just start to feel like, okay, yes, I have to do that. And yes, I have to do that. And, well, I'm becoming more and more conscious of what can I say no to. It certainly still feels like, I guess because everyone else seems to be in the same sort of mode, and there is a sense of desperation and panic in people genuinely when you talk to them, that it sort of feels like, okay, well, I have to do more to help them, or yes, I've got to do that because they need it and I can help. Very much sort of feels like stuck on a hamster wheel.
Sometimes someone used the analogy the other day of, I feel like we're all on the Titanic going down, 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 and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And the band's still playing in the background.
That's it. Not enough lifeguards. Women and children only, but not if you're a business owner. One of the things that I think we need to think about is that when we are stuck in survival mode, there is a way out. And I certainly know when I was in survival mode, the few times in my life that I have been, I certainly didn't believe there was a way out. I just thought that I had to endure this forever. And really, really grateful that I had an excellent doctor. I went to see him one day, and because I was having chest pains multiple times a day, and he said to me, just going to take your blood pressure. And so he did, and he said to me, I actually don't know how you're walking around because it's so high. I've never seen a blood pressure this high on somebody your age. And he said to me, if you don't make some major changes, you'll probably have a stroke before you turn 30. And I was 29 and turning 30 about 3 months later. And so it really made me think, what do I need to do? And he said, in a perfect world, you will go into your job today and resign and do something else. But, you know, we don't live in a perfect world, and that, as far as I was aware, wasn't an option. Fortunately, it became an option a few months later when I blurted it out to my boss. But, you know, so often when we're in survival mode, we just think there's no way out. I know I was really deeply unhappy. He also diagnosed me with depression in this conversation. And I think that shocked me even more than being told I had really high blood pressure and was on the edge of having a stroke, because I didn't realize that somebody like me could be diagnosed with depression.
Mel, can I jump in there, because it always concerns me, I suppose, that it takes a sort of a jolt like that,
Yep.
a health diagnosis or some other tragedy
Yep.
to make us stop and
Yep.
really reconsider. And in your case, fortunately, you know, it was a positive outcome. But
Absolutely.
you know, we hear cases of people where that doesn't happen. But why do we always leave it till we have that jolt?
Yeah, I don't know. And in the book, I talk about the analogy of the feather, the brick, and the truck. And the feather are those, you know, light symptoms or light signs that tickle you that something might not quite be right. And so in this instance, for me, there were so many feathers. The feathers were things like I was drinking, 4, 5, 6 cups of coffee a day. These days, if I have 2 coffees a day, my gut goes into spasms. I was getting home from work. I was working 12 hours a day. I was getting home from work, calling the local takeaway as I left my office, picking it up on the way home, eating takeaway, getting home at 8 o'clock at night, drinking a bottle of wine, going to bed at about midnight after I'd done a couple of more hours work at home, getting up at 5:30 to beat the traffic into the office, and then doing it again. And, you know, the chest pains were a feather. The high blood pressure was a feather. My doctor telling me if I didn't make some drastic changes, that was the brick. And I'm just really grateful that I listened, because the truck would have been having a stroke or worse. And like, I look at friends of mine. One of my friends had all these feathers and a couple of bricks raining down on her, and she didn't listen, and she had a heart attack at 52. And now, really grateful that she's alive still, and it's given her the wake-up call that she needed. But she could be dead. And so she had a heart attack called a SCAD, and I can't remember what SCAD stands for, but it's a really common heart attack in women who go through an immense period of short-term pressure. And at the time that she had it, there was a lot of pressure in her world, a lot of family things that were just blowing up, work pressure, some financial pressure. She was doing a renovation on her house with her husband, and that was causing pressure. And so, you know, when the doctor heard about all these things in her world, he was not surprised. But it's a heart attack that people don't talk about. And I think one of the reasons it's not talked about is because there's not a lot known about it, and it's mostly women that have it. And so it's recognizing the symptoms of, like recognizing what your feathers are. So it might be you're working really long hours. It might be that you're not sleeping. It might be that you've gone from having some really good habits, like regular exercise, eating lots of fruit and veggies, not having too much caffeine or alcohol, to changing those. Or it might be that you're suddenly really cranky, or that you're crying all the time and you don't know why. Or it might be shifting mood swings. And so the more you can understand your body and your mind and how you function, the more you'll be able to recognize when things change. And if they're constantly changing, then maybe it's time to stick your hand up and ask for help. And sticking your hand up and asking for help is one of the best ways to start gaining control back. Because when you... Oh, hang on 2 secs. You going?
I am.
Okay, bye. Sorry, husband's just going to work.
You'll look after the side gate?
Yep, okay, see ya.
I've done everything, actually.
I'm on a webinar, bye.
Oh, no, okay.
Sorry about that. He was meant to be at work already, but he wasn't. So one of the ways that we can start to regain control is to talk about it and to find someone who you trust to have a conversation with. And for me, that was my doctor in this instance. But in other times, I've had, a trusted friend or another health professional. Sometimes I think it's just when even just making the call and acknowledging that there's something that's not quite right can make a massive difference. So think about if you're feeling that you're, really struggling, who is it that you can talk to? As I said earlier, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I know when I rang a psychologist to book an appointment a few years ago because I was just going through a whole bunch of personal drama that I wasn't coping with, the simple act of calling her, having a really brief conversation about what I needed an appointment for, and making the appointment just gave me this immense sense of relief because I'd articulated fairly incoherently what was going on, and the comforting words of, we'll have a conversation about it when you come in a couple of days' time, just made me feel so much better about everything. Now, you might not be at the point of needing to get professional help like I was on this particular occasion, but even calling, Lifeline or Beyond Blue, or talking to a trusted friend, or, having a mentor, talking to a mentor about what's going on in your world can ease that sense of struggle. What I want to talk now about is, and if there were a few more of us, we'd go into breakout rooms, but there's a small group, so I think we can just talk about it together. What are some of the things, thinking about where you are on that ladder, what are some of the things that you can do to take back control if you feel like you don't have it?
Mel, I'd suggest one of the things that I think maybe Nadia, you may have mentioned, and that is actually doing that planning piece. I'm a bit the same in that if I just set time aside to write the plan, and whether that's whack it all on a list or just get it all out of my head, and then promptly lose the list, at least I feel better that it's not just up here, it's somewhere in this pile of paper. I've captured that thought or that action or whatever it is. It's almost the act of getting it out of your head that really delivers the benefit. And then, of course, it obviously helps to have that plan and be able to enact it and step it out and share the load. But I think really it's almost that cleansing feeling of just get everything out of here and not be carrying that weight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Does anyone else feel that way about planning or list making? I'm a big list maker. I've got lists everywhere on Post-it notes.
I used to make a list and then go, oh, bloody hell, there's 20 things on it. I'm not going to get them all done. But it does get it out of your head at least, so you're not, going in 20 directions. What I'm trying to do now is I've got a special journal, and it talks about your priorities and values for the day, and you make sure that you spend your time on those activities which are going to bring that. And so, you're conscious of doing the important stuff on your to-do list that are going to align with where you want to go. And sometimes it is, if you've got 20 things on your list, you've got to identify the ones you can give up.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important. One of my friends has a to-don't list, and so there's a whole bunch of things on her list that she just won't do, and they're different for everybody. One of the things on my to-don't list is housework. I hate doing it. I won't do it. It's the first thing I outsourced when I had some spare cash, because life's too short to clean toilets, as far as I'm concerned. These days, my husband does all the housework because he's a weirdo who loves doing it. He gets a deep satisfaction from cleaning dirty things, but I do not share that satisfaction. So I was very happy to hand those jobs over. But I think that it's working out what is it that will, as you said, Sandra, working out what is it that will help you progress to achieve your bigger goal. Yeah. And that can definitely give a sense of control back to you. There's 3 things that I believe we need to be doing to prioritize ourselves. The first is we need to become more self-aware, because when we are more self-aware, we have a greater understanding of who we are, what we stand for, what we value, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what our priorities are, what our values are. I think I said values twice then. Becoming self-aware, though, is something that's hard to do. Most of us think we're self-aware, most of us aren't. One of the things about being self-aware is understanding when we're, what am I trying to say? Self-aware people have a really good sense of how they're seen and perceived. An example that I quite like to give is a tale of 2 men I've worked with. One man believed that everybody loved him and that he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. He was not. He was a bully. He was seen as a bully. He was seen as somebody who blamed others for his mistakes, because he did. He was perceived as being somebody who didn't quite have his finger on the pulse. And he wasn't trusted in the workforce, in the workplace. My other client, and this was a man I worked with, not a client, compare this to one of my clients who doesn't quite believe he has the same level of self-awareness, but in reality does. People see him as somebody who's trusted, and they see him as somebody who they can trust because he asks the right questions, he genuinely listens when people talk to him, and he observes behaviours. And he also is really honest with his staff. And so he tries, he works in a bank, and they've been going through a lot of change lately, and he will do fairly frequent ask me anythings, and if he can't give an answer, he'll say why he can't. He won't make it up, he won't fob them off. He'll just say, I can't tell you the answer to this question because we're going through some legal things and it's confidential, but I'll give you a report back on this date. And then he does. So he does what he says, but he's taken a lot of time and put in a lot of time and energy into understanding who he is, understanding what matters to him, understanding what his personal values are and how they align with the organisation he works with, and then what his priorities are, both in terms of his professional life and as they relate to his job, but also his priorities in life in general. And that's what I think makes a really good leader. When you understand who you are, and when you believe that you're seen in a certain way, and that's how people genuinely do see you. Becoming self-aware, though, can take a lot of, it can be quite confronting, because nobody wants to really drill down into what they could do better. There's a few ways that we can become more self-aware, and one of those is, how do we create time and space for reflection? When we create the time and space for reflection, we can look at what's working in our lives, what's not working in our lives, what do we have control over that we can change. Self-aware people are very conscious of what they have control over and what they don't. There's a lot of things we have control over in our lives. We have control over what time we go to bed. We have control over what time we get up. We have control over the Netflix button on the TV. We have control over the food we eat, how much alcohol we drink, when we go to exercise and how much we exercise. We have control over the people we spend time with. We have control over the questions we ask and what we choose to listen to. What we don't have control over are how other people think or feel about us. We don't have control over time. We don't have control over the weather. We don't have control over death and some illnesses. Self-aware people are very conscious of creating a life that focuses on the things that they have control over for their own lives. And sometimes for the lives of the people who depend on them, like their children. But let's have a think about and a chat about what are some of the things that you've got control over in your life that you could maybe switch up a bit.
It's a great list, Mel. And thinking about it in terms of the things you can control and the things you can't control, I think it's a really good way to get control in some senses. Definitely, and even breaking it down into those really what might seem like small things or even insignificant things, but you're right, they are the things that you can control and manage, and actually things that really about reallocation of time as well.
Yeah.
You know, as you say, do I need to, at the end of the day, watch a rerun of, you know, whatever show because it's just that time that I just want to sit down and do nothing? And if that is important and it is, you know, part of self-care, then that's great, fantastic. But if I decide that I want to use that time and go for a 20-minute walk because that's the best time of the day for me to do that, then maybe I should do that instead. Yeah. I think what you're saying is it's about thinking about some of those things we do automatically and going, is this of benefit to me? Is this something I can make a different choice and get another benefit from potentially?
There's a reason why all the streaming services, Netflix, Stan, Amazon, automatically go to the next episode or the next show when you finish, and it's because they want you to keep watching. It's because they want to have control over how you spend your time with them. And I remember the first time I was watching Netflix years ago, and it came up with a message on the screen saying, "Are you still watching?" And you had to push a button. And the reason they do that is because people fall asleep while watching, and Netflix knows that. And Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, came out maybe about 8 years ago and said our biggest competitor isn't the other streaming services, it's sleep. Our biggest competitor is that at some stage you will have to go to sleep. Think about that.
Don't want our clients doing that.
Exactly. Because their business model is based on a number of hours watched. And so if you go to sleep, you're not watching. It's interesting, isn't it? You can also turn off that function for the next episode to automatically come on, which they never tell you, and most people don't know. And don't ask me how to do it, because I don't know how to do it.
Mel, I also wonder if part of this isn't, is there some sort of, again, a cue or reminder to make you think about those things, to get you out of autoplay?
Yeah. And I'm not saying Netflix is bad because, you know, but you need to have control over it. So what is it that might be your cue? Do you need to set an alarm? Do you need to put in a good bedtime practice? A few years ago, I started focusing on my sleep, and I decided that I needed to get more of it because I wasn't getting enough. And so I made the decision that I'd be in bed every night by 9:30 with the light out by 10. And I don't do it every night, but I do it most nights. And the impact that that has had on my overall life and health has been phenomenal. I think a few other things that we can be doing to become more self-aware is practicing mindfulness. When you're in survival or stuck mode, or even in achieving mode, you're so often focusing on what has to be done, and you're thinking about the past or you're thinking about the future. When we practice mindfulness, we're focused on the here and the now, right now. And it's only something that we're doing right now that we are worried about or concerned with or focused on. And for a lot of people, mindfulness might be meditation, or it might be doing yoga or some other kind of exercise. But mindfulness for me is about doing something that that lets your mind maybe wander or still. Excuse me, hang on. Sorry about that. Hope I didn't deafen you all. One of the things that I do to practice mindfulness, there's two things. I go for a walk without any headphones plugged in, and on my own. So I can just, observe what's around me, think about or have a look at, the trees and the flowers and the ocean and the beach, and notice changes that might have been made. There's a lot of development and renovations happening in my neighbourhood. And so I'll go for a walk and I'll just, think, well, that roof wasn't on that house the last time I walked past here, or they've painted their fence a different colour. And I really notice what's happening around me. Another way that I practice mindfulness is to bake. And I don't mean cooking dinner, I mean baking something that has a complicated recipe and takes time and focus. Because when you bake, or when I bake, if I don't focus, it'll be a disaster. And so taking that time to really think through is a really good form of mindfulness for me, because it takes my mind off everything else that's happening in my world. And then the third thing I do is I read a novel. And I can just get so lost in the characters and the story that people can be talking to me and I won't even notice, because I'm just so engrossed in what I'm reading. And so have a think about, what is it that you can do to practice mindfulness? And then the other two things are to listen and to be curious. When we genuinely listen to understand, rather than listening while we're waiting for our turn to talk, it's really interesting what you can hear from people and hear about people. And it's when people talk to you, the words they use are one thing, but their tone and their body language and their general demeanor and the phrasing that they use can tell you a lot about somebody. And so if you're, and a great way of increasing your self-awareness is to see how people speak and behave when they're around you. What's their body language like? Are their feet pointing away from you because they want to get the hell out? Are they answering your questions with one or two words because they really don't want to have a conversation with you? Or are they obviously engaged with what it is that you're saying and doing? And so learning to ask questions and learning to be curious about yourself and about others, and by others I mean other people and things in the world, can open your mind to possibilities and help you become a more self-aware person and understand, who you are and what you believe in a different way. The second way we can become more fully connected is to become self-motivated. As business owners, it's really easy to be motivated. It's really hard to sometimes do the work that needs to be done. When we are motivated, there's a lot of things that I think can motivate us. Some of us are motivated by money, some of us are motivated by wanting to be popular, some of us are motivated by wanting to be seen to be a success or influential. The only way these things happen is when we take action. And so motivation might be the goal, but taking action, motivation might set the goal, but taking action will help you achieve the goal. And it's like when I was writing my book, just reach over and grab it. I was really motivated to write this book because I knew that it could help a lot of people, and I knew that it would help reposition me to work with a market that I was really keen to work with. But motivation did not get that book written. Let me tell you, what got that book written was putting a plan in place and mapping out the plan, taking action, putting some good habits and routines around the plan, tracking my progress, and celebrating the wins. So my plan changed a lot because it took a long time to write this book because it kept on changing. But my plan was, what does the book look like? Why am I writing it? Who am I writing it for? What are the benefits that I want the readers to have? And what are the benefits that I want to have from this finished book? And then what are the chapters of the book? What am I going to say in the book? What am I going to say in each chapter? So I had an Excel spreadsheet, but I also had post-it notes all over my office walls with each chapter at the top and then all the things that could be in each chapter underneath it. And then I could move those post-it notes around if the plan wasn't quite right. And then I created habits and routines around how I would write this book. So, once a week or twice a week, I would go to my favorite cafe and I would set myself a goal of what I had to write in that time. And it would normally be 500 to 1,000 words while I had one coffee and was there for 45 minutes to an hour. And so I did that on a really regular basis, and that's what helped get the book written. And then, I tracked my progress. I also had a book coach, and she really helped me turn around from procrastinating to doing. And one of the reasons that she turned that around is because I paid her a lot of money, and we had coaching calls booked in. And if I didn't get a certain amount of work to her a week before each of our coaching calls, she just cancelled the call and wouldn't reschedule it. So there was big incentive there. And she helped me with the plan, and she helped me with the habit and the routine. And she also helped me track my progress and gave me feedback. But I think the biggest thing that I did was I celebrated every time I did something that to me was a win with the book. And it wasn't just finishing the book and sending it to an editor and getting it published. I celebrated when I had a breakthrough of an idea. One of the things I really grappled with in the book was, what do I call the 3 chapters? And, it's self-aware, self-motivated, and self-care. And when I had that breakthrough, which took a lot longer than it could have, I celebrated that. I shared where I was at with the book with my family and friends, and I shared it on LinkedIn and on Instagram and, on other social media channels where I have a good presence. And so people celebrated that with me. And I took people on the journey so that they had the buy-in for the book as well. So that they could, and that helped motivate me to get it finished. So work out what it is that you want to do and what motivates you, and then think about, what do you need to be doing to take action? So Sandra, with your business, you've said that you're just starting. Think about, how is it that you're going to take action to achieve what your goals are?
Yeah, I've got a big long list, but as you say, working through it constructively. But what keeps you self-motivated is, as you said, celebrating the little wins along the way, not just focusing on the big thing right at the end.
Yeah. And so many times I've worked on some big projects over the years, and so often we just celebrate the core milestones, But sometimes it's the little things, you know, getting a new client. How do you celebrate that? How do you celebrate being able to pay your bills at the end of each month? I used to always buy a new cookbook whenever I got a new client. And I have a very large cookbook collection because I've had a lot of clients in 16 years. But that was such a thrill for me to be able to, you know, go to my favourite bookshop and buy the latest cookbook that I really wanted when I got a new client. And so think about how celebrations can, what is it that, you know, what is meaningful to you to help you celebrate? And that'll be different for everyone. What about you, Cheryl? Do you celebrate much?
You know, again, I love the theory and fall down in the practice, because I think the short answer and the honest answer is no. I think my trap is falling and moving straight on to the next project, the next activity. It's like, okay, yep, great, that one's done, and now my focus turns to what comes next. So I think that's an amazing reminder. But as you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, how would I celebrate, or how would I enjoy celebrating those little milestones? And I really like what you said about the cookbooks, because you've got something tangible as a reminder that that's what this means. And every one of those cookbooks, you can probably remember which client it was, or if not by name, probably by circumstance. So to have a physical reminder like that, I think, is a really great way to do it. You know, in the past, I probably thought, oh, do we go to lunch? Do we have a glass of wine at the end of the day? Whatever it is. But again, they're things that disappear very quickly. And so you don't have that visual cue of that little piece of celebration that you can go back to. So I really like that idea of the cookbooks. Not being a cook, it's not the right one for me, but something similar to that, I think, would be a really good incentive.
One of my friends, I was talking to her the other day, and she took on a client early in the year that she really didn't want to take on because it would be, you know, she was already almost at capacity, but they begged and she said yes. And it was a client and a piece of work that, if it came off, would give her her reputation in the space in which she works a huge boost. But she said to herself, I'm going to spend all of this money on things that I wouldn't normally buy. So she bought a Thermomix, and she bought, and she said to me, I'm about to go and buy a new lounge suite from King Furniture. And if you don't know, King Furniture is probably one of the more expensive furniture shops in Australia, and each lounge will probably cost her between $5,000 and $7,000. But she said, I said to myself, if I said yes to this, then it's money that I didn't have in my budget. And so I'm going to just spend it on stuff that's going to give me joy and make my life easier. And so she is. And so that's another way of thinking about it.
And the long-lasting benefit is every time she sits on that lounge, she gets that benefit back, that little celebration of the win. So,
absolutely. And, you know, buying a Thermomix, that has already saved her hours each week when it comes to meal prep. And her husband, who never really cooked, is taking an interest because he has a gadget. Definite perk.
I think I need to think about what my item of celebration is that you know, doesn't need to be huge. I'm not sure I'm in the King Furniture category, but something that's meaningful to me. And something that is a constant reminder or a re-reminder of what that was about.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be something that you keep. In the book, I talk about how Quentin Tarantino on his film sets celebrates small milestones on a regular basis when they're shooting a film. And he said shooting a movie is really hard work. And so we need to celebrate the small things as well as the big things. And he said, I might just celebrate that the sunset was really perfect tonight for the sunset shoot, and that we got it done in 3 takes and not 10 takes. And so we'll crack open some champagne for the crew and the cast. And I really like that, because I think that just reminds you that celebration can be spontaneous. It doesn't need to be planned, but you can also tie a celebration to a goal or to an activity or to, a small win in your business. And the only person who can determine what those small wins might be are you. And, for some of us, it might be, God, I got through this day and I didn't think I would when I got up this morning. So, only you can work that out.
Yeah, I think it's a very individual thing, isn't it?
It is. But I think, when we learn to celebrate success, we want more success. And so that makes us better at what we do and more focused and more motivated.
I love it.
Not my idea, but I love it too. And then the third thing we need to be thinking about in terms of prioritizing ourselves is self-care. And a lot of people think about self-care in terms of massages and champagne and getting your nails done or getting your hair done, but self-care is a lot more than that. And one of the things that I really believe in when it comes to self-care is having boundaries. And, the quote that's on the screen is from Paulo Coelho. When you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. So think about all the things that you say yes to where you really might want to be saying no. And then think about, why did you say yes when you would rather say no? Is it because you feel, well, you tell me, why do you say yes to things when you wish you'd said no?
I think part of it is that sense of what we can manage versus what we can't manage. And sometimes you feel like you say yes to things simply because they're not in your control, when really they are.
Yeah.
But you kind of feel like you have to do it. Obligation to others is probably a really big driver.
Yep.
But yeah, that sense of, oh, well, it's just part of what has to happen, without running a filter over it, I suppose. I don't know. How do others feel about that? Clearly, I'm the basket case of the group at the moment.
I've got a client who, a former client who I was coaching, and when we started our coaching agreement, she wanted me to help her raise her profile so she could win a position on a highly sought after board. After a few months or a few weeks, she said, I don't think I want that board position. I think I'm just exhausted and overwhelmed because I don't know how to say no. And we looked at everything that she was committed to, and I said to her, what is it that, I said, you're on all of these, you've got a big job, you're a chair of a board, you've on a couple of volunteer boards. I said, when are your terms up for all those board positions? And she told me, and I said, well, why don't you just say no? Why don't you resign from this one that you've said is really frustrating you, that you've been on for about 6 years? And when this one has said to you that they would like you to take over the chair role for the next term, and you've said to me you don't want to, tell them no. And she looked at me and she said, I didn't know I could resign from a board, and I didn't know I could say no. And I looked at her and thought, you are a highly professional woman who is a partner in a very big company, has had a lot of life experience, and you don't recognize that you can say no to things that you don't want to do, that you feel obligated to say yes to. And it made me think, how often do we say that, particularly as women?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Mel. I wonder how often there's a sense of, well, I have to say yes, because if I say no, I won't be given an opportunity again in the future.
Yep. And conversely, I think a lot of the time as well, we say no to things because we don't believe we're good enough. So I think we need to flip sometimes what we say yes to and what we say no to.
It's a good point, Mel. It's a very good point. Sometimes we say no to something, even though we want it. We might want it. We might want to do it. We might aspire to do it, but we doubt our capabilities or ability at this point in time. Or we're being held back by those other things we said yes to and haven't offloaded. So,
Exactly.
yes, I'd love to do that, but I can't because I'm doing this, even though I don't really want to do that and I can't find a way out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of the things that somebody said to me years and years and years ago was, don't say no to something when somebody asks you. Don't make your first response no to an opportunity because you don't think you're good enough. The person offering the opportunity obviously believes in you. And so if they believe in you, why don't you believe in you? And that has stayed with me for 25 years since I heard it. And so whenever I'm offered an opportunity and my first response is I'm not good enough, I think, hang on, they believe in me. So if my first instinct is to say no to this opportunity, why is that? Is it because I genuinely don't want to, don't have capacity, I'm not interested? Or is it because I don't think I'm good enough? And if it's because I don't think I'm good enough, let's ask a few questions and, think about why I might think that when the other person believes that I am. Has that ever happened to any of you? Where you've said no to great things because you don't believe you're good enough?
I think that's definitely resonates with me, Mel. There's certainly, I think, opportunities where I've gone, yeah, no, I can't do that. That's not for me. But as you said, someone's asked you to take that on, not just randomly because they, needed something to say in the moment, but because they'd thought about it. But yeah, I think there's always that sort of sense of self-doubt that creeps in.
Yeah. It's a little insidious thing, isn't it? That self-doubt.
Sure is.
And one of the things that I really believe about self-care is when we look after ourselves, the self-doubt is less. And so self-care for me is being conscious of who you are, and what your health is like. And so if you haven't been to a doctor for a while, make an appointment. When this is finished, get on the phone and make an appointment to just get the basics checked out, to get your bloods checked out, to get your blood pressure checked out. If you're a woman who is in their 40s, and I suspect that most of us are, 40s or 50s, and you're not sure where you're at with menopause, get that checked out. Get a heart health check. They're free. They need to be booked, but they're free. And it will just give you a sense of, how's your heart functioning? Heart disease is the #1 killer of women in Australia. Not breast cancer, as they would have you believe, but it's heart disease. So think about, when was the last time you had everything worked out, checked out? And if it's been a while, just get a baseline so that then you can go back in a year's time and get another check, assuming you don't, need to go in the interim. The other thing when it comes to prioritising self-care is we need to make sure we get the basics right. And the basics are things like food, sleep and exercise. What are you eating? When are you eating it? Are you eating enough vegetables or are you living on a diet of fast food and cereal? What does your sleep what do your sleep habits look like? Do you stay up really late every night? Do you get up really early? Do you only get 4 or 5 or 6 hours of sleep like most Australians do? Or are you getting the 7 to 8 hours that most of our bodies need? I mentioned that a couple of years ago I decided to really focus on my sleep. One of the ways that I'm helping myself do that is I bought an Aura ring last year, which is this ring. It's kind of like a Fitbit, but it measures, it's a ring, and it measures your sleep, your heart rate, your exercise, movement, and a bunch of other things. But from a sleep perspective, it's been a game changer for me because I can now look at the data on my phone every morning and look at how much sleep I had across the different types of sleep: light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. And it will tell me you didn't have a very good sleep last night. Don't normally need to be told that because I can work that out for myself. But it tells me how I should function during the day. Should I have a day where I rest a bit more, or could I have a day where I'm a bit more active? And for me, that's really helped me work out what I could be doing in that day to maximize my energy levels for the day and for the next day.
Can you just explain that a bit more, Mel, in terms of, so I think we all have those nights where we know we've had a bad night in terms of sleep. So do you deliberately go about readjusting your day based on how you're feeling or what your energy level actually is?
Yeah, I do. So do you want me to show you what it looks like through the app?
Yeah, fabulous.
Okay, just give me a second to shift the technology. I'll stop sharing that screen and I'll share the screen on my phone. And I'll just go back to screen share, that one. Right. So you can see this is the app for the Aura Ring. And it's just updating for last night. So I'll show you the night before. So this is the sleep for the night before. This is what you get when it logs in. So it can see that my readiness is optimal. My sleep was optimal. I had 8 hours and 2 minutes of sleep.
Wow, you must be feeling fantastic.
Yeah, I was. I had a really big day yesterday, so I needed to have a really good night's sleep the night before.
Awesome.
So this is from Monday night, and now it's just downloaded for today. So this was last night. So last night, today I've got good readiness, and you can see that it's telling me that I've had an active week. It gives really good little encouraging, motivating messages, which I love. It's telling me that last night I did not have great sleep. I had 6 hours and 11 minutes. And you can see from the blue bar, the blue is when I was asleep and all the gaps were when I was awake. And then it's got my inactive time, my heart rate, my sleep efficiency, my activity, bedtime tonight, and a few other things. But if I look at the sleep function, which is the middle button at the bottom, it tells me that I had 8 hours 41 in bed, but only 6 hours 11 of sleep. And my sleep efficiency was only 71, which was not very good. My resting heart rate was quite high. Could have something to do with the big day that I had yesterday and the glass and a half of red wine I had before I went to bed. And my sleep score is pretty average with 72. And then it tells you the different factors that make up your sleep. And without going into all the details, the app has a lot of information about what it all means. And then I find this one really interesting. You can see the wiggly chart. That shows me when I'm awake and what the different stages of sleep are that I have. So for me, this has been really, really helpful in terms of tracking my sleep and looking at how I can make improvements.
And so if you saw that data, Mel, and obviously there are certain things like this amazing webinar that you can't change, but if you sensed, as well as the data tells you, that you've had a bad night, what actions would you take in relation to the activity the following day?
So,
Because I'd see as an excuse not to do any exercise.
yeah, no. So I'll go for a walk later. But one of the things that I would probably do this afternoon if I didn't have a full afternoon would be have a nap.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd probably have a 20-minute nap after lunch, and napping will show up on my sleep score and it will improve my sleep score.
Mm-hmm.
I might, go when I go for a walk, I'll probably go for a half an hour walk instead of a 1 hour walk. And I'll be conscious of going to bed a bit earlier tonight. So I went to bed at 10:30 last night, and that's a bit later than I would normally go to bed, particularly midweek. But, the other thing is that I can go back to this and I can look at, where is it? I can look at my sleep over time. And so I can, where is it? Where do I find it? There we go. I think that might be it. No, that's not it. Somewhere in the app, I can have a look at my history of sleep over the past month.
Right.
And so I can look at what's happened over that time that has caused me to not sleep very well. And in terms of the readiness factor, I find this one really interesting as well, because you can see it's got my resting heart rate, but it's also got my body temperature. And so it gives you a good cue. If your body temperature is elevated, then you're probably fighting off some kind of bug, which means you might want to take it a bit easier. Or if your body temperature is a lot lower than normal, then that can be a cue as well that there's something not quite right. So either, see how you go for a couple of days. Does it normalize again? Or do you need to go to the doctor? Are you not feeling well? So when I had my COVID shots, my body temperature spiked quite a lot overnight. It was at least 1 degree higher for the first night, and then it gradually came down over the next 3 or 4 nights. I had another time when I had a really bad head cold. Again, my body temperature overnight spiked. So it gives you, for me, it's been a really good indicator of something might not quite be right, but it's not going to work for everybody.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Mel. I know it was a bit impromptu, but
That's right.
many of us love a good gadget, and but also just the sense of, if you were an elite athlete, these are the types of things that not only would you be tracking, your whole team would be tracking it.
Absolutely.
But
Yep.
In some ways, maybe we need to think of ourselves as we are running businesses, we are running lives.
That's
what
it.
can be more important and rewarding than that? And so maybe we need to take that sort of elite athlete approach about ourselves.
Absolutely. And, I saw a high performance coach a couple of years ago for a year, and I really debated about whether I would invest the money because it was quite expensive, but it was worth every penny because it just helped me realize. She did a lot of DNA testing, which gave me a really good sense of what my body does, how my body behaves, what my body likes and doesn't like in terms of food and sleep and exercise. And so that intel now plays out in how I choose to, what I choose to eat and how I choose to sleep and where my energy lies during the day. So, I know that my creative time is late in the day, sort of between about 4 and 7 p.m. is when I'm really good at focusing on hard things and solving hard problems. And a good example of that, I reckon, is Wordle. I'm obsessed with Wordle. If I do it in the morning, I find it really hard to work out the word. If I do it in the evening, it comes really quickly. Whereas for a lot of people, it's the reverse. And, so often we're told, get up early and, get up at 5 a.m. and do your exercise and, have your creative time. 5 a.m. is a terrible time of day for me because that's when I need sleep. That's when I'm really good at sleeping. And I know that my creative time is late in the day.
It's about accepting that we're all different, and we should look at what works best for us, not what works best for someone else and trying to copy it.
That's it. So, so I look at when I plan my work week, and I'll usually have meetings in the morning, and I'll focus on doing the deeper thinking work in the afternoon. Whereas for a lot of people, they'll do the deeper thinking work in the morning and they'll do the more busy type work in the afternoon. But that doesn't work for me. And so it's knowing what your biorhythms and energy rhythms and circadian rhythms are like. And when you've got that, then that can help you work out what you need to be doing from a self-care perspective and when you do it. The other things when it comes to self-care are, have clear boundaries. And for me, I time box things. And so I know when I am available for other people and when I'm not. Excuse me. And I overlay that with my husband's work schedule because he's a shift worker and works part-time. And so I look at his diary and his schedule and plan when I'm going to be doing things like travel based on his schedule as well. Or when I might go out in the evening, if he's working in the evenings, then I'll be more likely to go out with friends in the evenings when he's at work, because otherwise I'll be home on my own, which is great a couple of nights a week, but not 5. I work out when I'm going to do exercise. I go to a Pilates studio and I put all of my Pilates classes 2 weeks ahead into my diary so that they're prioritized, but also so that I don't book meetings or, workshops or masterclasses over those, because that's a priority for me. I, at the beginning of each year or at the end of the year for the following year, I'll put in all the holidays that I want to have. We take a week off every quarter, and sometimes we'll just stay at home and not just do stuff around the house. But that break from client work and from really any kind of work is really important to me, to continually make sure that I'm refreshed and rested for what the next quarter is going to bring. And so by doing that, I'm setting myself up to be able to work harder and have more energy when I need to for my clients. The other thing that I think is really important when it comes to self-care is doing things you love. What is it that you love to do, and how can you get more of that in your time, in your day, and in your week? And one of the things that I love to do is to read fiction, and just to read in general, but particularly I love reading murder thrillers. And you'll laugh when I say this, but I try to read for half an hour before I go to bed every night. And sometimes reading a bloodthirsty murder thriller is not the best choice, but they help me wind down and forget about, the dramas of the day. I also try to read most mornings while I'm having breakfast. And, I don't have children, so I don't have other people in my life who I need to focus on in the mornings, but it's just a really nice way for me to start the day. So think about, what is it that brings you joy, and how can you do more of that every day, even if it's 5 minutes a day? Because I think we get so caught up in doing busy that we forget about doing fun. One of my friends during COVID was in Melbourne, multiple Melbourne lockdowns. I said to her on one phone call, you're sounding pretty perky today. And she said, yeah, I've had a bit of a mind shift. She said, every night before I go to bed, I think about one thing I'm going to do tomorrow that is going to give me joy. And so I go to bed excited for tomorrow because of this thing I'm going to do. And the thing might be watching a movie with one of her kids, or talking to a friend who she hadn't spoken to for a while, or going for a walk on her own, or, whatever it was. But she said, every night I go to bed thinking of this thing, and I wake up in the morning looking forward to the day, because I know that I'm going to do something I love that's just for me for some time today.
No, I can share an example, a bit of a wacky example, and Beck will be familiar with this. I know a lot of people have issues around Wednesday being, hump day, in that sense of, oh my God, we're only halfway through the week, or whatever it is, or others see it as a really positive, maybe it depends if you're glass half full or glass half empty. But for me, I have reconsidered Wednesdays. And I actually find that that is probably my most productive day of the week. You know, you've sort of got into the rhythm of the week, and it's Wednesday that I actually get excited about, simply because I feel like I'm in the flow of the week and I feel like I achieve a lot more. So just, that sense of thinking about what you want to achieve and how you're going to get there. What I need to do is make every day Wednesday.
Yeah. Or, think about how you manage your week as well. We all work for ourselves. I think we all work for ourselves. So, how do you structure your week? I structure my week on a Monday. I don't start work until after lunch. Sometimes I do. This Monday I was sitting at my desk at 8 o'clock because I've got a massive week and I'm about to have a week of holidays. So I've got, a fair chunk to get through. But I'd usually, like I say to myself, I give myself permission to not sit at my desk until 2 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. And so if for some reason I decide to sit down earlier, that's great. But I don't have to, because I officially don't begin till 2 o'clock. I also very rarely do meetings on a Monday, with one exception. I have 2 accountability buddies and we meet every second Monday from 5 till 6, 4 till 5 in daylight savings. And that, helps focus my fortnight. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, client work, business development, sales meetings, whatever happens in the week. They're not normally, it's very rare that I have 2 weeks the same. And then Fridays, again, I don't tend to do a lot of meetings. I very rarely do client delivery on a Friday because people are in Friday mode. I do a lot of working on the business, a lot of planning work on a Friday. I try to finish work at lunchtime on a Friday and if I'm going to have a long lunch with friends or clients, it will always be on a Friday. So think about, how do you structure your week so that you get that focused work, that focused time, that time to do the things that are important but not urgent. And
Mel, from the people that you speak to, from your clients and others, do you feel that more people, perhaps as a result of COVID, are making those sorts of decisions about not just working 9 to 5 Monday to Friday because we always have, but actually thinking about, why do I have to work these days, these hours, and how am I going to use my time?
Yeah, I really am seeing that, particularly from my clients that have office-based businesses. They have a much greater capacity for flexibility if they're not customer focused or customer facing, I guess. But again, a lot of it depends on who you are and what your business is. Some of my clients, I do a lot of work with boards, and they're often all volunteer boards. And so the work that we do together is often out of hours. I was in Melbourne last week and I ran a strategic planning day for a client on a Saturday, and I was very happy to do that. But it meant that I just took a day off the next week so that I could have that time to rest. And I think we need to, it's really hard when you work for yourself to not be on that hamster wheel of I have to say yes to everything because I don't know where the next lot of money is going to come from. But sometimes you have to just have faith that it will happen. And I know that faith is not a very good business strategy, but if you're exhausted and a bit desperate, that comes across. And then I think the final thing that's important to remember when it comes to self-care is having a gratitude practice, being grateful for what you've got, saying thank you to people. The number of people who forget to say thank you seems to be growing. So what is it that you can do to demonstrate gratitude to your family, to your clients, to your friends? And what might that look like? When I've been sending out my book, I've been gift wrapping them and writing a handwritten thank you card to everyone who's bought a copy from me. And the number of people who've contacted me and said, I didn't expect a thank you card, let alone a handwritten one, I'm blown away by that. It was the easiest way I could think of to express my gratitude that people are giving me their money for something that I put a lot of effort and a lot of my heart and soul into. And people appreciate that.
I did read, Mel, one of the comments on a LinkedIn feed yesterday was the best form of marketing is gratitude.
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what resonates with you from those three things? Self-awareness, self-motivation, and self-care.